Christian book review. I read God Doesn't Whisper for my August book by Jim Osman. This one was hard. I have to say, if you are not willing to learn, if you are not willing to be wrong, if you are not willing to actually look at the scriptures that you have relied on for your theology when it comes to hearing the voice of God and look at them in context and really deal with being wrong, you're not going to like this book. However, if treating God's word faithfully is important to you, and if truly knowing, proper hermeneutics and how the things that we say have an effect on people, then this would be a great book for you. This is a large book. It's almost 300 pages. And he is very passionate about this topic. It is involving the hearing the voice of God doctrine, basically. And I didn't even really know what that was when I got started reading this book. But when he got into it, it like really clicked. And I was like, oh, I use a lot of these sayings a lot of the time. I've also listened to a lot of the teachers that he comes against, and he comes against them hard. Scylla Shire being a big one that he comes against, Beth Moore being another one. He comes against Blackaby, who's another one, Charles Stanley, and a few other big names that we hear about, in preaching and that have huge followings that use this hearing the voice of God theology. And when I say he rips it apart with no mercy, he did. It was really painful to read, honestly. And you can tell by his tone in this book, like this is what he's passionate about. Like for me, it's the attributes of God. If someone gets me started in the attributes of God, my tone, my everything will change. You can tell that this is what he's really passionate about. He cares so much about the way God's word is treated and about how people misrepresent God and misuse God with all of these different types of sayings and theologies that they preach. So a couple of the ones that he goes over is the I heard a still small voice, a verse jumped off the page, God gave me a sign, God opened a door, put out a fleece, I felt led, I had a dream, I saw a man in white. Those are the big ones that he tears apart. But what he does is he goes through each one with the scriptures and quoting these writers, these speakers who have used these, and shows how grossly out of context they are. And it's hard to even stick to them after you see it. The one I was most nervous about was the I felt led, because I feel like I use that one a lot. And actually it wasn't, I don't use it the way that I guess other people use it, but that's why language is so important. And my mentor tells me this all the time, that I will say things because she comes from Word of Faith that don't register to me being something off, or that would cause someone to stumble. But because I do say I felt led, I don't use it the way that he describes that, hearing the voice of God theology uses it. But even if I said that, like, and if I'm teaching, it could lead someone to think that I'm using it in that way, if that makes sense. So he does give options on how we can express when we feel, we are being led to something, or that God is showing us something we can use that is not incriminating God, right? Because we use these terms and they incriminate God. If we say, well, God told me to, or I felt God tell me this, or I felt God leading me here, but God didn't actually, we're putting God's name on something that he didn't actually say. And that's really the basis of what he is saying. Anyway, fantastic read. It was hard. I am not going to lie. I was having like an existential crisis going through this. And I was like, well, how do I explain what I'm feeling? How do I explain when I feel led to do something? So you just have to finish the book. If you are willing to be wrong, if you are willing to take a good hard look at some of these doctrines that we don't even realize we're being taught, this is a fantastic read. So God Doesn't Whisper by Jim Osman. 10 out of 10. Cannot recommend this one enough.